It often feels like students today are navigating, a real tightrope, balancing so much, demanding coursework, social lives, future expectations. It's a unique kind of pressure cooker.
It truly is, and that's precisely what we're diving into today, this really fundamental connection between a student's academic life and their overall mental well-being. The research we've looked at, it shows these aren't separate issues at all. They're deeply interwoven. They influence each other in really significant ways.
Exactly. And we've got a fascinating mix of information here, haven't we? From looking at how a student's mindset towards learning impacts their resilience, to some pretty eye-opening data on anxiety and depression levels, and even some, promising ideas coming out of positive psychology that might offer some solutions.
Yeah, our exploration takes in quite a range. There's a study on how high school students bounce back from academic challenges based on their learning goals, then comprehensive statistics on the mental health landscape for U.S. college students, like just this past academic year, plus research into how focusing on well-being can impact students, and some in-depth analyses of how anxiety and depression specifically affect academic success.
Okay. So, our goal today is to really unpack this complex picture, figure out the key drivers at play, and most importantly, pull out some practical insights that you, our listener, can maybe use to better navigate the very real pressures of academic life.
Okay, let's get into it. Let's start with this idea of academic resilience. How do students bounce back from setbacks?
Right. So, our first source looks specifically at this in high school students. It introduces this idea of achievement goal orientations. Basically, it asks, what's driving a student? Are they motivated by what's called a mastery goal, genuinely wanting to learn and improve? Or is it more of a performance goal, primarily focused on getting good grades, maybe looking better than others? And what's the key difference there in terms of how these mindsets affect a student when they hit a bump in the road, like, say, a bad grade?
Well, the study suggests that students with those mastery goals, they tend to show greater academic resilience. They see setbacks more as um, opportunities to learn what they need to work on, rather than viewing them as, proof of failure.
Mhm.
So the core insight here, a focus on learning itself, not just the letter grade, seems to act like a kind of shield against academic setbacks.
That totally resonates, yeah. If your focus is on actually understanding the stuff, a less than perfect score might sting, sure, but it also gives you clear direction on where to put your energy next. But if it's all about getting the A, well, anything less can feel like a major blow, can it?
Exactly. Now, the researchers did note that their study was specifically with high schoolers. However, they suspect that similar patterns would likely hold true for younger students as well. It's a theoretical expectation.
Interesting. Were there any other big takeaways from this look at how students develop that academic bounce back ability?
Yes, they definitely emphasized that we need more research to understand all the different things that contribute to academic resilience. It's not just these goal orientations. And they're also keen to figure out what actually shapes these goals in the first place. What makes a student lean towards wanting to truly master a subject versus just chasing top marks.
That feels like a really important question for everyone involved in education, teachers, parents, even the students themselves.
Absolutely. And based on their findings, the study suggests something pretty interesting. Maybe we should shift the focus in education a bit, moving away from this, intense pressure on grades alone and putting more emphasis on the value of actually mastering skills and developing a deep understanding.
I like that idea. It feels like creating a learning environment where growth and actual knowledge are the prizes, not just the report card.
Okay, so that gives us a look at how a student's mindset can impact their ability to navigate challenges. But what about the bigger picture of student mental health right now? That's where our second source comes in, doesn't it? It does. And this source paints a really sobering picture of the mental health of college students in the U.S. The trends we're seeing are, frankly, quite concerning. When we compare data from the 2013-14 academic year to just this last one, 2023-24, there's been a significant jump in the number of students screening positive for symptoms of anxiety and depression.
That's worrying to hear. Can you give us some specific numbers to kind of illustrate that?
Certainly, in 2023-24, 13% of students reported seriously considering suicide in the past year. That's up from 10% a decade earlier. And perhaps even more broadly felt in spring 2024, nearly half, 49% of all college students reported feeling lonely.
Nearly half. Wow.
Yeah. And on top of that, a staggering 76% experienced moderate to high levels of stress in just the past month. So these aren't just, abstract numbers. This paints a picture of a significant portion of the student population really grappling with difficult emotions that can derail their academic journey.
Wow. Half feeling lonely, three-quarters feeling stressed. Those are really high numbers.
They are. And here's another critical point from that data. There's a significant gap between those who are struggling and those who are actually getting help. Of the students who screened positive for anxiety or depression, fewer than half received any therapy or counseling in the past year.
So a lot of students are carrying this heavy burden without support. And what kind of impact is all of this having on their actual academic performance?
A really substantial one.
Yeah.
Nearly 8 in 10 students reported that their mental or emotional difficulties negatively affected their academic performance for at least a few days in the past month. And over 1 in 5 said it impacted them for 6 or more days.
Mm.
That's a clear and direct link between mental health and academic success, or, unfortunately, the lack thereof sometimes.
So what are the main mental health issues then, the ones that are driving students to seek help in the first place?
The data shows the top 5 concerns are anxiety, stress, depression, family issues, and, interestingly, academic performance itself. It becomes a bit of a vicious cycle, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The pressure of academics can fuel mental health challenges, which then, in turn, make it harder to succeed academically.
It really does. And it sounds like students themselves are pretty aware that they need support.
Yes, overwhelmingly so.
Yeah.
65% of students said they felt they needed help for emotional or mental problems in the past year. And when we look at the overall picture of positive mental health among college students, well, it has declined from 51% in 2013-14 down to just 38% in 2023-24.
Ooh.
So we're seeing a clear downward trend in overall well-being.
This paints a really concerning picture. So given these significant challenges, what potential solutions or maybe positive forces are being explored? That's where this idea of positive psychology comes into play, right?
Exactly. Our third source introduces something called positive education as a potential way forward. It's grounded in positive psychology, which is a field that made a deliberate move, not just to focus on mental illness, but also on understanding and nurturing well-being, individual strength, and positive psychological states.
Right.
Think of it as actively building what's right, not just fixing what's wrong.
So instead of just trying to treat anxiety or depression after they develop, it's about proactively fostering things like happiness and resilience.
Precisely. Positive psychology identifies these key areas that contribute to overall well-being. Things like positive emotions, joy, hope, gratitude, and positive personal strengths like optimism, resilience. Also positive social connections and supportive environments like encouraging schools and universities.
And the well-known PERMA model fits into this framework, doesn't it?
Yes, Martin Seligman's PERMA model. It outlines 5 core elements that contribute to a flourishing life. P is for positive emotion, E for engagement in activities, R for strong relationships, M for a sense of meaning and purpose, and A for a feeling of accomplishment.
PERMA.
Think of PERMA as your well-being toolkit, maybe. Positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishments. These aren't just, feel-good concepts. They directly fuel your academic engine, potentially.
So how does this translate into the academic world then, with this idea of positive education?
Well, positive education aims to weave these principles into the fabric of the learning experience itself. It focuses on academic well-being, which includes things like being engaged in learning, avoiding burnout, having positive feelings about education, also feeling secure in the learning environment, and not experiencing loneliness.
And within positive psychology, are there specific concepts that are particularly relevant to how well a student does in their studies?
Absolutely. Academic self-efficacy is a big one.
Self-efficacy. Okay.
That's essentially how confident a student is in their own ability to succeed academically. And not surprisingly, if you believe you can succeed, you're more likely to put in the effort, stick with it through challenges, and ultimately achieve more. Studies have consistently shown a positive link between self-efficacy and academic achievement.
That makes intuitive sense. What about the concept of hope? That seems like it would be pretty crucial for students facing tough academic loads.
Yes, absolutely. In an academic context, hope involves setting educational goals, developing strategies to reach those goals, and staying motivated along the way. The researchers talk about 2 key aspects of hope. One is crossing thought, which is about being able to find different paths to your goals when one way is blocked.
Resourcefulness, sort of?
Kind of, yeah. And the other is agent thinking, which is that inner drive and motivation to actually tackle those difficult tasks.
Got it. So this research actually looked at whether a positive education program could make a difference in these areas for students.
It did. It was what's called a quasi-experimental study. Think of it like comparing two groups in a real-world setting to see if an intervention makes a difference. This study was done at Farhang University of Zhejiang. One group of students participated in 8 90-minute positive education sessions over 2 months, while a control group didn't get that program. And they measured academic well-being, self-efficacy, and hope levels before the program, right after, and then again 2 months later to see if it stuck.
And what did they find? Did this focus on positive psychology actually lead to positive changes for the students?
It did indeed. The study found significant positive effects of the positive education program on all 3 areas: academic well-being, self-efficacy, and hope. And importantly, these positive changes were still evident 2 months after the program ended.
That's really encouraging. What kind of topics did they cover in these positive education sessions then?
Well, the sessions focused on specific positive psychology concepts, things like appreciation, finding meaning in life, having a sense of purpose, also fostering hope, building self-esteem, cultivating optimism, and practicing forgiveness. The topics range from teaching concrete happiness skills and introducing the idea of forgiveness, to explaining how optimism works and the importance of hope and purposefulness, and also strategies for boosting self-esteem and exploring what gives life meaning.
Can you give us an example, like what a session on, say, happiness skills might have involved?
Certainly. That session involved defining happiness first, then exploring practical techniques. Things like maintaining a healthy diet, exercising regularly, shifting to a more positive mindset, engaging in altruistic acts,
Yeah.
nurturing social connections. Students were then encouraged to actively practice these skills in their daily lives.
Okay.
Another session focused on gratitude. It explained its benefits and different ways to express it. And students were even asked to write down 5 things they were grateful for and compose a thank you letter as a homework assignment.
It sounds like a very hands-on, skills-based approach to building well-being, not just theoretical.
It is. And the researchers concluded that the effectiveness of positive education likely stems from its focus on students' inherent strength and these positive concepts like hope, gratitude, and positive emotions. They even referenced other research showing that regularly practicing gratitude is linked to greater optimism and higher academic satisfaction.
And the emphasis on finding meaning in life, that seems particularly relevant for students navigating the often intense pressures of academics and future career paths.
Absolutely. The intervention stressed the importance of discovering meaning in life, in their education, and their social interactions, which aligns with a whole body of research demonstrating a strong link between having a sense of meaning and overall well-being.
So the key takeaway here is that actively nurturing these positive psychological states could be a really powerful tool for students to thrive, both academically and personally.
That's the suggestion, yes. The study recommends that universities seriously consider integrating these kinds of positive education approaches to boost student well-being, self-confidence in their abilities, and overall hopefulness, which could, in turn, lead to greater academic success.
That's a hopeful note, definitely, especially after hearing those earlier statistics about student mental health challenges. But we also need to acknowledge the very real negative forces that can impact students, like anxiety. Our next source takes a deep dive into that, doesn't it?
Yes. Our 4th source provides a comprehensive overview of how anxiety affects academic achievement. It defines anxiety as those feelings of worry, fear, apprehension that so many people experience, often accompanied by physical symptoms too. And it emphasizes just how common this is among students. So anxiety isn't just like general stress. It actively hijacks your brain power, making learning and recalling information a real struggle.
And this review doesn't just talk about general anxiety, it breaks it down into different types that students might experience, right?
It does. It looks at generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD, where students feel excessive worry about lots of things, including their academics, naturally. Then there's social anxiety disorder, SAD, which
Sure.
involves intense fear in social situations that can really hinder things like participating in class discussions.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then there's test anxiety, a very specific type of performance anxiety that kicks in before or during exams.
Right. And across these different types of anxiety, what are the main ways it tends to negatively impact a student's academic performance?
The review highlights several key mechanisms. Anxiety can impair concentration and the ability to learn new information effectively. That's a big one. It can also make it harder to retrieve information from memory, which is obviously crucial during tests or exams.
Definitely.
Furthermore, anxiety can lead to avoidance behaviors like skipping classes or procrastinating on assignments, and it can significantly damage a student's self-confidence, their belief in their own abilities, their self-efficacy, as we were just talking about. Plus, chronic anxiety can disrupt sleep and negatively impact physical health, which then further affects cognitive function. It's sort of a multi-pronged attack on academic success.
It sounds like it. And the review also delves into the specific ways anxiety interferes with the learning process itself, like the cognitive mechanisms.
Yes, it talks about cognitive interference. That's where anxious thoughts literally take up space in your working memory, making it harder to focus on the actual task at hand.
Like mental clutter.
Exactly. There are also attentional biases, where your mind tends to get stuck on the negative possibilities, dwelling on what might go wrong instead of focusing on the material. It also covers how anxiety undermines a student's sense of control and self-belief, the specific pressures of test anxiety, negative self-talk, constant worrying or rumination, the tendency to avoid challenging tasks, disrupted sleep patterns, and even the impact of social factors and pressures.
The review also touches on the fact that this relationship between anxiety and academic achievement, it isn't the same for everyone.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. It discusses factors that can influence it, like gender differences. Some research suggests girls might experience higher levels of academic anxiety. Socioeconomic status can also play a role. Students from lower income backgrounds might face additional stressors that contribute to anxiety. Cultural and ethnic factors can influence how anxiety is experienced and expressed and how people cope. And of course, the specific academic pressures and the overall school environment itself are significant factors.
So, a student's individual circumstances and the environment they're in can really shape how anxiety impacts them academically. Given all of this, what are the practical implications? How can we better support students facing this?
Well, the review outlines several important implications for educational practices and potential interventions. At the individual level, it points to the value of things like counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and stress management techniques.
Okay.
For schools and universities, it recommends implementing stress reduction programs, social emotional learning, or SEL initiatives, and generally cultivating a more positive and supportive school climate. The importance of collaboration between educational institutions and mental health professionals is also emphasized, along with a general focus on promoting resilience and overall emotional well-being.
It sounds like a really comprehensive approach is needed, one that addresses both the individual student and the broader systemic factors at play.
Absolutely. The review also highlights key areas for future research, things like longitudinal studies to track the long-term effects of anxiety, more research into the effectiveness of different interventions, the importance of early identification and prevention efforts, and the need for policy changes within educational institutions to prioritize mental health support for students, better access to counseling, training for educators, creating that supportive environment.
It's clear that anxiety presents a significant obstacle for many students, and really understanding its multifaceted impact is crucial for creating more supportive and effective learning environments. Now, let's shift our focus to another major mental health concern: depression. Our final source explores its connection to academic performance.
Yes, this study specifically looked at the relationship between depression and how well undergraduate students performed academically in Nigeria, actually. It used a standard measure called Beck's Depression Inventory to assess depression levels, and the students' overall grade point average, their CGPA, as an indicator of their academic performance.
And what did they find? Is there a clear link between how depressed a student is and their academic success, according to this study?
Yes, the study found a significant negative correlation between depression and academic performance. Essentially, students who reported higher levels of depression tended to have lower GPAs, which aligns with what we might intuitively think, right? If you're struggling with feelings of sadness, hopelessness, it's likely going to be much harder to focus on your studies.
That makes sense. The study also looked at whether certain groups of students were more likely to experience depression.
It did. In this particular study, conducted at Benue State University, they found that female students were more likely to report symptoms of depression compared to male students. Interestingly, though, they didn't find a significant difference in depression levels between students from lower and higher income backgrounds.
Oh, okay.
Which is a finding that actually differs from some other research in this area, so that's a nuance worth noting.
That is an interesting nuance. What else did this source tell us about how depression can impact students in their daily lives?
It summarized the common ways depression manifests itself across different domains: emotional, cognitive, behavioral, physical. So things like persistent sadness, loss of interest in activities you used to enjoy, difficulty concentrating, feeling fatigue, changes in sleep patterns. It really emphasizes how these symptoms can interfere with everyday functioning, including the ability to work effectively and, crucially, attend classes regularly.
So it's much more than just feeling a bit down. It's something that can really impair a student's ability to engage with their studies and their life in general.
Exactly. The difficulties with concentration, the lack of motivation or interest, the overwhelming fatigue, and the potential for poor attendance due to depression, these can directly and negatively affect a student's academic progress. This study reinforces the idea, which is supported by other research too, that there's generally an inverse relationship between academic achievement and depression.
So higher depression, lower achievement.
Generally, yes. Some studies even suggest that depression can significantly lower a student's GPA and interfere with their ability to complete academic tasks. The feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and low self-esteem associated with depression can really undermine a student's academic confidence, their courage, you could say. And that can lead to a sense of failure, which might then be reflected in their grades.
It's interesting to note the different findings on gender and socioeconomic status compared to some other research. It really highlights how complex these issues are, doesn't it? And how they can play out differently in various contexts and populations.
It really does. And ultimately, this study also concludes that depression is a significant risk factor for poor academic performance. It reinforces the call for educators, counselors, and researchers to develop targeted strategies and intervention programs aimed at reducing depression and enhancing students' overall psychological well-being as a key way to improve their academic outcomes.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the real key takeaways that emerge when we consider all of this information together?
I think the central theme, the one that resonates across all our sources, is the absolutely critical and, frankly, undeniable link between a student's mental well-being and their academic success. We've seen how challenges like anxiety and depression can negatively impact academic achievement, and conversely, how focusing on positive psychological states, implementing targeted interventions like positive education, can potentially lead to real improvements.
And it's not just about the presence or absence of mental health challenges, is it? Even the way a student approaches their learning, whether they're driven by that genuine desire to learn, the mastery goal, or just the need to get good grades, that can significantly impact their ability to cope with the inevitable stresses of academic life.
Precisely. These are complex issues. They're influenced by a wide range of factors: an individual's mindset, personal experiences, their socioeconomic background, and the broader academic and social environment they're navigating. There's no single simple solution here.
So, considering all these interconnected factors, here's a final thought for you, our listener. What small but maybe significant step could you explore in your own approach to learning, or perhaps your own well-being, that might create a positive ripple effect? Maybe it's consciously shifting your focus sometimes from just getting the grade to truly understanding the material. Or perhaps it's exploring some of those positive psychology concepts we discuss, like practicing gratitude or setting meaningful goals for yourself.
Yeah, we really encourage you to take some time to reflect on this information and perhaps look into resources related to positive psychology or the mental health support services that might be available to you wherever you are. Understanding these dynamics is, well, it's a crucial first step towards not only navigating the challenges of academic life, but also towards fostering both your academic success and your overall well-being.